Once upon a time, there was a logger named Bill. He got married and had kids, and he was tired of his short, boring American name, so he named his kids Hansel and Gretel. They lived in a house in the forest, a day's drive from any town. And every week, Bill would drive his pickup truck to town, spend the night there, and then come back with food. One day, during a storm, a tree fell on top of the truck, ruining it. It would take several days to fix, even if he could fix it. Meanwhile, the family had to carefully ration their food. There was just one problem. Hansel and Gretel were teenagers. These meager portions weren't enough. They felt like they were starving after just the first day. This hunger made them forget about the whole rationing thing, so they broke into the cupboard and started eating. Soon, Bill found them and sent them to their room. That night, he and his wife discussed what to do. There was no way their food supply could last long enough to fix the truck. His wife suggested that the only way they could survive would be to lead the children out into the woods and abandon them. Maybe some stranger would take them in? Otherwise, they would all die. They tearfully agreed that was the best choice, but little did they know, Hansel and Gretel were listening. Hansel went into his closet, dug into it, and found a GPS. One time, he'd gone into town with his dad and bought the GPS, which he used occasionally on walks. Now was the best time to use it. He hid it in his pocket, and when they were led out into the woods, he pulled it out and began using it to find his way back. But then, something terrible happened. The battery ran out. Hansel and Gretel were first to wander, hoping they were going the right direction. They had almost given up hope when they saw a house. This wasn't a normal house. Instead of being made of bricks, wood, straw, and such, it was made of candy. It had gingerbread walls, sugar windows, chocolate roof. The children were drawn towards it like moths towards a flame. They were just about to start snacking when an old woman opened the door and said, "Oh, good children!" licking her blood-red lips and eyeing the children with a hungry gaze. Hansel pointed at her and said, "Hey, look, it's a nice old lady. I bet she loves children." "Oh, yes, I do," the woman said. "Children are so sweet." Gretel walked up to her and said, "Hi, what's your name?" "Voldara. And what are your names, dears?" Hansel and Gretel introduced themselves, and Voldara told them, "Don't you worry, I'll raise you up plump and fat, healthy. You can eat whatever part of my house you want, as long as you stay out of the garage." For the next few days, Hansel and Gretel gorged themselves on candy. At one point, Hansel ate too far into the wall and bit down on an electric wire. Yep, this house of candy had electric wiring. It also, thankfully, had indoor plumbing. After several days, Hansel and Gretel had gained weight, and Voldara said, My, you two are getting fat. It's time to put me back on your menu. I'll get the oven going." She went and turned on her oven, then waited for about 5 minutes before telling Gretel, "My oven thermometer just doesn't work quite right. Could you be tasty? No, kind enough to lean into the oven and feel if it's hot enough?" While Hansel had trusted Voldara completely, Gretel didn't quite seem to think that Voldara was right. Some of the things she said were just a bit suspicious. She looked into the oven and saw what looked like a human skull. Thinking back through Voldara's words and actions, she realized this woman must be a cannibal. She acted confused and said, "What do you mean? Like this?" She leaned away from the oven. "No," Voldara said. "You've got to lean into the oven." "Like this?" Gretel laid down on the floor. "No, no, no! You've got to do it like this!" Voldara leaned into the oven. Gretel quickly jumped up and shoved the old woman in, then closed the oven doors. The cannibal was cooked in her own oven. Hansel and Gretel went into the off-limits garage, and there they found a semi-truck filled with candy and, more importantly, with a GPS. They used it to drive back to Bill's house, flattening a few trees along the way. And there they found that Bill and his wife were distraught, wondering about the fate of the children. And the truck had still not been repaired. They welcomed the children back with open arms. Bill used the semi to drive into town and came back with a load of food. The family had food and was happy and content. Thank you for listening. Feel free to critique this speech on my blog.